We've got several different stories from several different media outlets, you guys. It's time for another episode of the World's Newsround. Let's go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is Reganelite here with another episode of the World's Newsround, where I cover various stories from outside the UK, all in one premiere video. And we start here with Reuters with an exclusive from them, with the headline that Iran withheld launchers for missiles sent to Russia, sources said. So we have talked on this channel in the past about Iran potentially sending ballistic missiles to Russia. However, Iran in the past have denied that they have assisted with ballistic missiles. We know that there have been drones that they have produced Iran to supply for Russia in its war against Ukraine as well. Now, this obviously, Reuters is one of the more reliable sources, one of the more reliable newspapers out of some of those out there. And they do a very good job of keeping their sources very secret as well. And most times it turns out what some of their sources turned out to be true in the end as well. So why would Iran withhold launchers from missiles sent to Russia? There may be a number of reasons, but there may be a couple of reasons for it. But I want to read into it to see if what I'm thinking may be the case. It may have something to do with what's happening in Armenia and Azerbaijan route, with the potential trade route there potentially. It may not, but let's have a read. So Iran did not include mobile launchers with close-range missiles that Washington last week accused Tehran of delivering to Russia for use against Ukraine, according to three sources with knowledge on the matter. The sources, a European diplomat, a European intelligence official, and a US official, said it was not clear why Iran did not supply launchers with the Faith 320 missile, raising questions about when and if the weapons will be operational. The US official, who like other sources spoke on condition autonomously, said Iran had not delivered the launchers at the time of the US announcement about Iran's delivery of the weapons. The European intelligence official said without elaborating that they did not expect Iran to provide launchers. Reuters first reported on Iran's plan to send the missiles to Russia. Two experts told Reuters that there could be several reasons why the launchers were not sent. One is that Russia may plan to modify trucks to carry missiles, as Iran has done. Another is that by withholding the launchers, Iran is allowing space for new talks with Western powers on easing tensions. The Russian Defense Ministry declined to comment. You're not going to expect Russia to comment on what Western medias are reporting. The US National Security Council did not immediately respond to a request for comment, and the Pentagon declined to comment. Yeah, they're all going to say, they're not saying nothing. Iran's mission to the United Nations did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Tehran denies providing Moscow with missiles or with thousands of drones that Kiev and Western officials have said uses against military targets to destroy civilian infrastructure, including Ukraine's electricity grid. Now, obviously the stories about them providing missiles is obviously one that's been built up for a while, but the ones about drones I've heard consistently, and I'm pretty confident that many of the drones that have been used in the Ukraine war have been made by Iran, but they will continue to deny it. That there's perfectly their way of saying it as well, but but it does raise questions of why they've not given like Russia missiles. Unless it's either to do with money or political reasons or something else. Like I said, there was a story a while back that I think I even covered it this week or last week, probably on the World's Newsround or on the Snowflake Corner, where Iran wanted to make sure that they still have an easy trade access to Armenia, and Azerbaijan obviously are looking to close a very important, looking to take control of a massive trade route in there, and Russia kind of just like stepped aside and not really involved in any of it at all. And Iran are not happy that kind of Russia aren't taking more of an initiative on it. At least that's the story. So that could be a reason why Russia and Iran. I think it's more. There is more to it from what I recall, but it's one reason why they may not always be 100% on board with things. even though their alliance is kind of better benefits both nations in the situations that they're both of them are in. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken said that on September the 10th that Iran had delivered the Faith 360 missiles to Russia and would likely use them within weeks in Ukraine. The missile will pose an additional challenge for Ukraine, which is consistently adapting its air defenses to innovations by Russian forces. Iran's semi-official Fars news agency said the missiles travels 4 times at the speed of sound when approaching targets. Blinken said the missiles threatening Europe's security would be fired against short-range targets, allowing Russia to reserve more of its extensive arsenal for targets beyond the front line. The Faith 360 has range up to 75 miles, 121 kilometers. The United States, Germany, Britain, France imposed new sanctions on Iran, and the EU said that the blog was considering fresh measures targeting Iran's aviation sector. The Kremlin at the time declined to confirm its receipt of the missiles, but acknowledged that it has cooperation with Iran, including the most sensitive of areas. Blinken did not say how many Faith 360 Iran supplied to Russia or when they were sent. No, they're not. There are some things they're just not going to give away. Reuters determined through the shipping data that a Russian freighter sanctioned by Washington or Port Ola Freed made voyages between Iran's Caspian Sea port of Ahmedabad and the Russian port of Oska several times between May and September the 12th. Interesting. Fabian Hines, an expert on Iran's missiles with the International Institute for Strategic Studies, said he could not confirm that Tehran withheld the launches. Ballistic missiles require specifically designed launches in order to be fired. And according to Hines, one reason Iran didn't send any launches may be that the civilian trucks that Iran modified to launch these and other missiles are robust enough to operate in rough terrain during Ukraine's harsh winters. Iran-modified trucks made by Mercedes and other companies turn them into easily discarded missile launches, he said. That suggests, he continues, that Russia could modify its own military-grade vehicles. A commercial off-the-shelf Mercedes truck is not just that off-road capable, he said. David Albright, a former UN nuclear inspector who heads the Institute for Science and International Security, could not say whether Iran delivered the launches. But he noted that Iran's new president, Masoud Pezeshkian, and other Iranian officials will be meeting with European officials on the sidelines of next week's UN General Assembly in New York to test the potential for diplomacy to Iran's nuclear program, regional tensions, and other disputes. It could be that they are holding back the launchers to provide little space for these talks, he said. Only one can imagine if there are Iranian missiles raining down on Ukraine and there would be condemnation at the General Assembly. But he was skeptical of any progress, saying he doubted Iran would make any necessary compromises. Interesting. Let's say, yeah, it's an interesting story. So, Reuters are saying they are withholding them, even though Antony Blinken said there have been sent some. The truth is of the matter, we just don't know. But it's an interesting situation for say the least, because obviously Russia have been getting a lot of weapons and supplies from North Korea. We've seen 1 or 2 stories of that obviously been happening over the last several months or so as the relationship between those two have built up. So, and obviously this relationship here, although definitely not 100% perfect, it's in both their interests to help each other out, given both their situations. But obviously, understandably, Western nations and would want to try and stop any kind of passage of travel between the two countries. But it's kind of hard for them to do so. So the best they can do is just apply sanctions on them. But as we know, they've all declined to comment on whether or not they actually have or haven't. So we'll have to wait and see on that one. More on that one, I'm afraid. This next one I've got for you guys is an interesting exclusive from Al Jazeera. Very interesting one indeed. So, how a Bangladesh minister spent more than $500,000 on luxury property. The undercover sting reveals how the politician bought hundreds of overseas homes on a $13,000 a year salary. This is in the UK, by the way. Bangladesh former land minister Sovalim Chowdhury spent more than $500,000 on luxury estate in London, Dubai and New York, but did not declare his overseas assets on his Bangladesh tax returns, Al Jazeera's investigation unit, I-Unit, has revealed. The I-Unit went undercover in the UK to investigate how the 55-year-old Chowdhury, from a powerful family in the port city of Changchong, amassed a property empire despite a $12,000 annual limit as part of the nation's currency law on the amount a citizen can take out of Bangladesh. So where did all the money come from? Dr. Shalom Malik, an advocate for the Supreme Court of Bangladesh, told Al Jazeera that the country's constitution clearly states that politicians must declare their foreign assets. Authorities in Bangladesh have frozen his bank accounts and are now investigating claims Chowdhury laundered millions of dollars into the UK. Chowdhury has been a close ally of the remote Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, who fled Bangladesh in August after hundreds were killed as security forces cracked down on student protests. After Hasana's departure, Bangladesh authorities launched an investigation into allegations of widespread corruption in her government. The Central Bank of Bangladesh has since frozen the bank accounts of the former Land Minister Chowdhury and his family, while the State Anti-Corruption Commission has started an investigation into allegations that he had illegally acquired thousands of Kron Taka, that's hundreds of $1 million, and laundered it into the UK. So, potentially taxpayer money, potentially? Is that what we're talking about here? The I-Unit investigation revealed that Chowdhury was able to buy 360 homes in the UK alone since 2016. This guy bought 360 homes. Oh my God. Anti-money laundering laws consider high-ranking politicians and government officials to be a higher corruption risk, as their wealth could be stolen, state fund, or bribes paid to obtain government contracts. London estate agent Ribban Mahmood introduced Al Jazeera's undercover reporters to a network of London advisors that helped Chowdhury build his property empire. Charles Douglas Solicitors LLP, which acted for him in refinancing more than 100 property loans. Paresh Raga, who made hundreds of loans through his company Market Financial Solutions and other businesses. Azrael Murad and Singaporean bank DPS also lent money to the minister. As a high-ranking politician, he would have been classified as a politically exposed person, PEP, which would have required extra scrutiny and stringent checks when dealing with estate agents, banks and lenders and lawyers in the UK. In response to the findings, Chowdhury told Al Jazeera the funds used to buy his overseas properties came from legitimate businesses outside Bangladesh, which he has owned for years. Okay, sure. Chowdhury left Bangladesh in August and claims to be the subject of a politically motivated witch hunt against people associated with the previous government. Charles Douglas Solicitors LLP, Market Financial Solutions, Paresh Raga, DBS Bank and Ripon Mahmood told Al Jazeera they had carried out robust anti-money laundering checks on Chowdhury. They also said that his funds came from legitimate and long-standing businesses in the United Arab Emirates, the United States and the UK, not Bangladesh. The advisors said that recent events in Bangladesh was not information available to anyone conducting historic anti-money laundering or know your customers checks, which are standard procedure for financial institutions. Al Jazeera's investigation goes on trial of the minister's millions to find out how Chowdhury built his $500,000 property empire. And there'll be a video there if anybody wants to watch as well. This guy owns 360 homes in the UK. And that's not counting properties elsewhere as well. Did authorities in the UK not notice anything wrong with this? No, it's perfectly fine. Perfectly fine for one person that owns 360 properties. Perfectly fine. Perfectly fine. Nothing there, nothing to see whatsoever, guys. I hope this guy gets arrested and sent back to Bangladesh. Because this stinks of corruption. It stinks of it, guys. It stinks of money laundering. It stinks of all of it. Very nice exclusive piece here from Al Jazeera. I do recommend checking out the video as well. But it's a guy from a $13 a year salary, and he's claiming he's got other investments elsewhere, such as, and they don't reveal what else they have. So make what you will of that one is what I will say, guys. Make what you will of that one. The next story I've got for you is a very tragic one in West Africa, guys. The floods are still, taking place in many here, and doesn't appear to be an end in sight. So torrential rain unleashes catastrophic floods in West Africa, sadly. As torrential rain across Central and Western Africa have unleashed the most catastrophic floods in decades, residents of Malariski, the capital of the fragile Nigerian state of Borno, which has been at the centre of an Islamic extremist insurgency, said they've seen it all. Yeah, we talked about the floods in Nigeria in short videos before, but just on this picture alone, it's just absolutely horrible. Absolutely horrible. All these homes underwater. Yeah, it's, when I just don't know how they're gonna recover. The floods, which have killed more than 1,000 people and displaced hundreds of thousands across the region this year, have worsened the existing humanitarian crisis in the country that has been impacted the most. Chad, Nigeria, Mali and Niger, over 4 million people have been affected by the flooding so far this year in West Africa, a threefold increase from last year according to the United Nations. With rescue operations still underway, it's impossible to give an accurate account of the lives lost in the water. So far, at least 230 were reported dead in Nigeria, 265 in Niger, 484 in Chad, 55 in Mali, which has seen the most catastrophic flooding since the 1960s. And there will be a lot of unaccountable, sadly, as well, which is even worse. While Africa is responsible for a small fraction of global greenhouse gas emissions, it is among the regions most vulnerable to extreme weather events. The World Meteorological Organization said earlier this month. In sub-Saharan Africa, the cost of adapting to extreme weather events is estimated between $30 to $50 billion annually over the next decade, the report says. And it warned up to 118 million Africans could be impacted by extreme weather by 2030. 118 million Africans, guys. Yep, but they say climate change wasn't real. Malariski, the capital of Borno State, has been under significant strain over the last decade. Borno has been hit by a consistent string of attacks from Boko Haram militants who want to install an Islamic state in Nigeria and have killed more than 35,000 people in the last decade. Saleh Bakar, a 21-year-old from Malarengi, has said he was woken up last week around midnight by his neighbours. Water is flooding everywhere, he recalled their frantic screams in a phone interview. They were shouting, everybody come out, everybody come out. Older people with disabilities did not know what was going on. He says some people were left behind. Those who did not wake up on time were drowned right away. Local authorities are overwhelmed by the scale of disaster. Over 600,000 people in the Borno state have been displaced, while at least 100 were killed and 58 injured, according to the UN. Last week, floods killed about 80% of the animals in the Borno State Museum Park, and an unspecified number of reptiles escaped. The city's main prison was so damaged that hundreds of inmates escaped. The waters knocked out the walls of local police stations and some of the government's offices. Rescue operations continued 10 days later, with some parts of the city returning to normal as waters recede. Survivors recount the chilling scenes of bodies in the flood waters. Anarasko Balaringa, the mother of three, had to abandon her recent baby born as water surging over their house overwhelmed her. I yelled for my family to help get my child out, but I don't know if they were able to. I haven't seen any of them since, she said. Crying out camp where the rescue workers brought her. The flood also destroyed critical infrastructure. Two major dislikes from a dam along Alu. When the dam failed, 540 billion litres of water flooded the city. Key bridges connecting Malabarski collapsed, turning the bridge into a temporary river. Governor Balaroski Zalum urgently appealed for international assistance. Our resources are stretched to the limit. We cannot do this alone, he said. The World Food Programme has set up kitchens providing food to displaced in Malarangi, as well as emergency food and cash assistance to people in the most hard-hit areas, USAID said on Wednesday. It has provided more than 3 million in humanitarian assistance to West and Central Africa, including 1 million provided to the immediate aftermath of the floods. But many said that they were left to fend for themselves. Floods in Mosley and Niger have impacted over 841,000 people, killing hundreds and displacing more than 400,000. Horilla Armud, a 50-year-old single mother of six, is one of them, and she said the floods destroyed her mud hut in the northern city of Algarez. The rooms are destroyed, the walls fell down. She said it's a big risk to live in the mud hut, but we don't have the means to build concrete ones. Amaradu, who is unemployed and lost her husband 4 years ago, said she has not received any support from the state and has not had the opportunity or the means to relocate. She and her children are living in temporary shelter next to the shuttered hut, and freight in the torrential rains might return. I understood there was a change in the weather, she said. I have never seen such a big rain like this this year's here in Algarez. In Masoreti, 50% of the city remains underwater, according to local authorities. A forecast predicted more rain across the region. Nigerian authorities warned earlier this week that more floods are expected. Magua said he has kept going back to see if the waters have swallowed his home have receded, but has not happened. He said he has not received any aid from authorities except some food items handed out at the local school where he is sheltered with 5,000 others. He is trying to stay sane by helping others along with his friend. He helped recover 10 bodies and rescued 25 people, rowing them down the strait in a canoe. He said he is also helping out cooked meals for those that are also sheltering with him. I'm volunteering to help, but I'm also a victim, he said. Our people need us. They need help. International. This is where the international bodies step in and step up to the plate, and more and more when it comes to Western international organisation bodies, government, shall we say, not enough respondents, not enough world organisation responses to them, not enough of it. We know that the climate is making things worse. We know it is. Yeah, they literally in the article, you got people saying they've never seen floods like this in their lives. And those climate deniers will say, oh, it's perfectly natural. No, it's not natural. It's not supposed to be getting worse. It's supposed to fluctuate. And it's not fluctuating. It's getting worse for people. I mean, there's so much. The stories just continue to pile up about how problematic that climate change is. But people still don't want to buy into it. They still don't want to buy into it, guys. It's insane. Absolutely insane. So guys, just before I go to the next article, if you haven't already, please hit the like button. We greatly appreciate it. Shares across social media so others are notified of this video. If you haven't subscribed already, please consider subscribing because it really does help support the channel. If you want to financially support me and the work that I do here on this channel, the best way to do so is by becoming a YouTube member for just 99p. 99p may not sound like much, may not sound like a lot at all, but it actually makes a massive difference. Gets you access to custom emojis, gets you access to membership community posts, early access to content as well. And on top of that, whenever you comment on any of my videos, I also give a response to them. Sometimes it can take a bit longer than others, but anyone who is a financial supporter of me, obviously, I'll give a little bit more to them because they are helping me financially support me, because this is one of my only main resources of revenue. So anyone who can support me in any way, shape or form is greatly appreciated. Other ways you can do so, by buy me a coffee. Link for that is in the description as well. You could also join me on Patreon as well. On Patreon I have exclusive content that you can check out on there as well for members as well. So do check out all the links. Thank you so much for supporting me, whether it's financially or non-financially in any ways. It is greatly appreciated. So the next piece I've got for you guys is a very long one, so which is why I've only got if we have time we'll cover Ukraine after this one, but we'll see how this one goes. But there's a very fascinating piece by the New York Times. As President Trump demanded investigations of foes, and he often got them. He has threatened to target his perceived enemies if elected again. A look at his time in the White House shows how readily he could do so. So this is a long piece about how Donald Trump obviously goes after those who try to go after, goes after those who go after them. And I'm generally, I really do think that the likes of Harris, Biden, and many Republicans who used to work for Trump, who turned on Trump, they could be targeted in some way, shape or form if Trump is re-elected president of the United States again. Many people's livelihoods do depend on this outcome, and obviously with the plans of Project 2025, we know that even though Trump has denied it, we know that he's heavily involved in that. So let's read into this fascinating piece, guys. This piece is by Michael S. Schmidt. So it was the spring of 2018, and President Donald J. Trump, faced with an accelerating inquiry into his campaign ties to Russia, was furious that the Justice Department was reluctant to strike back at those he saw as his enemies. I'm just keeping water next to me, guys, understandably. In an overall office meeting, Donald Trump told startled aides that if Attorney General Jeff Sessions would not order the department to go after Hillary Clinton and James B. Comey, the former FBI director, Mr. Trump would prosecute them himself. Recognizing the extraordinary dangers of the president seeking not just to weaponize the criminal justice system for political ends, but trying as well to assume personal control over who should be investigated and charged, the White House counsel Donald F. McCann second sought to stall. How about I do this, Mr. McCann told Mr. Trump, according to an account verified by witness. I'm going to write you a memo explaining to you what the law is and how it works. I'll give you that memo and you can decide what you want to do. The episode marked the start of a more aggressive effort by Mr. Trump to deploy his powers against the perceived enemies, despite warning not to do so by top aides. And look back at the cases of 10 individuals brings a pattern into clearer focus. After Mr. Trump made repeated public or private demands for them to be targeted by the government, they face federal pressures of one kind or another. The broad outlines of this episode have been previously reported, but a closer examination reveals the degree of concern and pushback against Mr. Trump's demands inside the White House. And it highlights how closely he's expressed desires to go after people who have drawn his ire, were sometimes followed by the Justice Department, FBI, or other agents. Even without his direct order, his indirect influence could serve his ends and leave those in sight facing expensive, time-consuming legal proceedings or other high-stress inquiries. The story of that period has a powerful resonance today, as Mr. Trump, angered in part by the 2 federal and 2 state level indictments of him since leaving office, threatens to carry out a campaign of retribution if he returns to the White House. He has signaled that a second Trump administration would be stoked not with people who serve as guardrails during his 3rd term, but with carefully vetted loyalists who would eagerly carry out his wishes. If elected again, he would also return to the White House, bolstered by the Supreme Court's ruling in July that former presidents have broad immunity from prosecution and officials act while in office. Interviews, court filings, and secret White House documents shed new light on how Mr. Trump's demands for prosecution in the spring of 2018 ignited a behind-the-scenes push by some of his top aides to contain his impulses, protect the rule of law, and instigate the White House from legal and political blowback. Issues that some of them say are arguably even more acute today. The memo that Mr. McCann's lawyers in the White House counsel office produced following Mr. Trump's April 2018 tirade about prosecuting Mrs. Clinton and Mr. Comey amounted to a primer on presidential power and the limits on it when it comes to the justice system, according to draft copies of it. You've asked what steps you may lawfully take if you disagree with the Attorney General's decision not to pursue criminal prosecution or not to conduct further criminal investigation. A draft of the memo that ultimately went to the President began. The lawyers acknowledge that presidents can have considerable, if indirect, influence over Justice Department decision making, not least due through the power to replace the Attorney General. But they made clear that Trump did not have the authority to instigate an investigation or prosecution yourself or culminate the Attorney General by directing a different official to pursue a prosecution or investigation. As one draft memo put it, the main message to Mr. Trump in the memos was that the presidential meddling in a prosecution flouted the norm and that had become deeply embedded in American politics and government in the wake of Watergate, which could have profoundly neglected consequences for Mr. Trump, including the potential for impeachment and electoral defeat. Even as they made that argument, the lawyers remained so concerned that being ignored by Mr. Trump that they smuggled drafts of the memo out of the White House complex so they would have a record of their efforts to restrain him if his demands for retribution got him and them in political and legal trouble. And they were right to be worried. Within a month, Mr. Trump plunged ahead with one of the most successful efforts to have a Democratic critic investigated. He publicly demanded and ultimately got an inquiry by federal prosecutors into whether John F. Kennedy, the former Secretary of State, had broken the law by remaining in contact with Iranian diplomats while Mr. Trump was moving to end the nuclear deal with Tehran that Mr. Kennedy had helped negotiate during the Obama administration. The Kennedy investigation was not an outlier. Though the rest of Mr. Trump's time in office, he never let up on pressuring federal agencies to take action against his perceived enemies, even as if he was counseled by aides like Mr. McCann and John F. Kennedy, the White House Chief of Staff from the middle of 2017 until the beginning of 2019. Those who find themselves facing down the power of the federal government range from high-profile figures like Mrs. Clinton to FBI officials like Mr. Comey to people like formerly in Mr. Trump's personal orbit like Michael D. Cohen, his former lawyer and fixer, and Omaros Malarosco Newman, a former contestant on The Apprentice who worked in communications at the White House in 2017. Mr. Trump's efforts were so sustained of troubling to top West Wing aides that at least two of them took from the White House notes that they had written that memorize how he wanted to use the powers of the federal government against his rivals. Just want to make a note of something I just noted for later. In a few of the cases where Mr. Trump wanted investigations, there were legitimate basis for action, but not in many others. There was little or no legal justification, and none resulted in a criminal conviction. I wonder why. There is no records of the inquiries and other actions coming about as a result of the formal signed order from Donald Trump. Instead, he repeatedly signaled what he wanted publicly and privately, leaving no doubt amongst ordnance. His defenders often seek to explain away Mr. Trump's threats to take legal action against opponents as campaign trail busters. But those who work directly with him in the White House said Mr. Trump should be taken at his word. When Trump says things like this, he's serious about it. I know from experience that he's consistently voiced the idea and is something that he will come back to until he gets done, said John R. Bolton, who served as Mr. Trump's national security advisor and said he had witnessed the president discussing who he wanted to investigate before himself becoming one of Mr. Trump's targets. Yeah, John Bolton knows about this, but he's a bit of a nutter as well, to be fair, guys. So after the 2016 campaign, when chants of lock her up punctured his rally, Mr. Trump professed that he was ready to set aside his long-standing call for Miss Clinton to be prosecuted. And during his tumultuous first year in office as the investigation of his campaign ties to Russia's growing traction, his main focus was fending off that inquiry, which only expanded after he fired Mr. Comey. But by late 2017 into early 2018, Mr. Trump's attention shifted back to an old preoccupation that he wanted to go on the offensive. He told aides that he wanted to use the IRS to target Mr. Comey, Peter Stolocz, the lead FBI agent from the Russian investigation, Lisa Page, a top FBI aide, and Andrew McGay, a bureau's deputy director, according to federal court records and previous public statements made by Mr. Kelly, the White House chief of staff at the time. Repeatedly, Mr. Kelly and Mr. McGahn, the White House counsel, strongly cautioned Mr. Trump against such talk. To them, using the federal government to go after those he saw as his enemies was a tactic from an authorization playbook. Mr. Kelly specifically told Mr. Trump that along with being immoral and self-destructive, weaponizing the IRS was illegal. And by April 2015, Mr. Trump took that idea to another level. Yeah, James Comey, we'll never forget that. That was quite a moment. Earlier that month, Mr. Trump learned that the FBI had searched the New York office for Mr. Cohen, his longtime lawyer who had channeled hush money payments in the final days of 2016. The campaign to a porn actress who said he had sexual liaison with Mr. Trump. In the days after the raid, Mr. Trump told Mr. McGahn that he wanted to order Mr. Sessions, the Attorney General, to prosecute Ms. Clinton and Ms. Comey, and that if Ms. Sessions refused, he would take matters into his own hands, according to people told about the conversation at the time. Mr. McGahn tried to explain to Mr. Trump as president, he did not have the power to prosecute anyone. That power, he explained, was left to the Justice Department, and if Mr. Trump ordered the department's career prosecutors to do something they considered improper and unjustified, they would quit. In order to provide a memo to Mr. Trump about what he could and could not do, Mr. McGahn was hoping the president would become distracted by other matters while the lawyers did their research and wrote up their findings. He was so determined. He was so determined to see his enemies pay. His lawyers determined that much of what Mr. Trump wanted to do to instigate investigations of rivals was most likely legal, but argued that strong constitutional norms of non-political law enforcement should also guide your decision-making, according to a draft from the memo. However good the president's intentions, there are those who would view any political involvement in a prosecution or criminal investigation as violation of the constitutional norm and that the presidential constitutional obligations, one draft said. It may prove difficult to explain in an easy, understandable way why intervening in particular processing was necessary and would not compromise its fairness. There was a distinction, the lawyers wrote, between what a president technically could do and what he should do. The gulf between the overwhelming power of the federal government and the vulnerability of the individual citizen may be nowhere near starker than the criminal prosecution of an investigation, they wrote. A polished version of the memo was delivered to Mr. Trump. Whether he read it or not is not known. But in the West Wing, there was continued concern that Mr. Trump would do something politically catastrophic or even illegal, creating potentially serious problems for him and those working for him. Lawyers in the White House counsel office who worked on the memos printed copies of drafts which were taken off the White House grounds for safekeeping. If the lawyers were to face questions about what advice they have given Mr. Trump, they would have a record that they had tried to deter him from what they believe would be seen as an egregious misuse of executive power. Yeah, so when the president said he wants something, and they've been telling them to do something that they can't technically do, but they're also ignoring the power of the president as well. It's like, what are they supposed to do here? They're kind of in a catch-22 situation, some of these people. At least 2 other West Wing officials defied Mr. Trump's repeated instructions not to take notes and wrote down accounts of Mr. Trump's eruptions about the use of federal government to target his perceived enemies. These notes were taken from the White House as well to ensure they were documentation. It's a good thing these were all taken out, because he would have it all shredded, all these notes and memos. The special counsel's team learned through close relationship they built with witnesses and their lawyers about Mr. Trump's demands for prosecution and the existence of the memos, but believed they did not have a strong basis to investigate. They decided not to pursue the matter further. And still, the president conducts deeply troubled and Andrew Goldstein, one of the lead prosecutors on the obstruction investigation headed by the special counsel Robert S. Mueller. The third, Mr. Goldstein saw it as among the most concerning of Mr. Trump's behaviors. Using presidential powers to launch investigations of your rivals without real evidence or potential wrongdoing goes against everything the Department of Justice stands for, said Mr. Goldstein, who, along with other members of Mr. Mueller's team, is publishing a book about their investigation this month. But it is not necessarily a crime, he said, and after the Supreme Court immunity decision, this kind of conduct may not be subject to criminal investigation at all. Asked on Friday about Mr. Trump's use of threats against his foes, a Trump campaign spokesman called the accounts propaganda, falsely accusing President Trump of doing what Democrats are doing to him, carrying out illegal weaponizing lawfare against their political opponents. The Justice Department's investigation into Mr. Kerry, who served as Secretary of State under President Barack Obama, is a case of study of how Mr. Trump's desires could lead to a pre-securial action even without a formal order. Just weeks after the White House counsel office produced its memos in 2018, Mr. Trump, over 2 days on Twitter and during a public appearance at the White House, attacked Mr. Kennedy for remaining in touch with Iranian diplomats after leaving office. Mr. Trump, who wanted to pull the United States out of the nuclear deal that Mr. Kennedy helped negotiate with Tehran, suggests that Mr. Kerry might have violated the Logan Act, which restricts unauthorized citizens from negotiating with foreign governments. A day after Mr. Trump's second tweet, the Justice Department began to take action against Mr. Kerry. That day, a top official at the Justice Department in Washington told national security prosecutors that the U.S. Attorney Office in Manhattan that day were being assigned to investigate Mr. Kerry, who denied any wrongdoing. The conduct that had annoyed the president was now a priority of the Department of Justice. The U.S. Attorney in Manhattan at the time, Jeffrey Bergman, later wrote in a book. No one needed to talk with Trump to know what he wanted, Mr. Berman had wrote. You could read his tweets. Anyone wanted to please him at the main justice, from the Attorney General down through the political appointees of his chain of command, could act on them. And nearly a year later, Mr. Trump posted on social media again about Mr. Kerry, raising questions about whether he had broken the law. That afternoon, a top Justice Department official in Washington again called the U.S. Attorney's Office on Monday in Manhattan to ask the office why they had not taken up an investigation step that would have given the department access to some of Mr. Kerry's electronic communications. According to Ms. Berman's accounts, the same official pressed the office again the following day. This is Trump's power here. when he was president. The pattern here is clear. It's outrageous, Miss Bennett recounted in his book. In the beginning, we got pulled into his investigation by main justice after Trump started tweeting this displeasure about Kerry. And now, 11 months later, on the same day of another Trump tweet, in which he specifies about being criminal behavior he believes that Kerry committed, we were being pushed to move forward. Mr. Bowman said there is no other way for me to look at it than that the Justice Department was pressuring his office on what was taking so long and asking, why aren't you going harder and faster at your enemies of the president? Mr. Bolton, who became Trump's national security advisor in April 2018 and served through September 2019, said he witnessed Mr. Trump on at least half a dozen occasions telling aide that he wanted Mr. Kerry prosecuted for his contacts with Iran. When top Justice Department officials learned that prosecutors in New York would not be bringing a case against Mr. Kerry, a senior aide to Attorney General William Barr called Mr. Berman to say that the case would be passed along to another U.S. Attorney's office. That second set of prosecutors ultimately came to the same conclusion after those in New York did not bring charges. They tried desperately, trying desperately to prosecute Mr. Kerry. Nearly 4 years after Mr. Trump left office, a more complete picture of how Mr. Trump's critics and rivals came to be scrutinized by the government is emerging from interviews and court records. Mr. Trump sought to use the government to go after four broad categories of perceived enemies and critics. One was an FBI official, who he sought to portray as biased or corrupt as they investigated him. Another was political rivals, who he sought to tar of allegations of the same kind of wrongdoing, like collusion with foreign countries that he was under investigation for. He also wanted government power deployed against news organizations that produced coverage that he did not like, as well as against people from his personal and business life he felt had betrayed him. His most intense focus was on FBI officials who were involved in the Russia investigation. They include Mr. Comey, Mr. McCabe, and Mr. Stroves, all of whom came under the scrutiny of the Justice Department. And in the case of Mr. Comey and Mr. McCabe, who were subjects of unusual and invasive IRS adults. A later investigation by the Tax Agency Inspector General found no evidence that the adults could be traced back to political pressure. Mr. Trump also pushed aggressively for an investigation based on his belief that the entire Russia investigation stemmed from a conspiracy against him by intelligence or law enforcement agencies. Mr. Barr named a special counsel, John F. Durham, to undertake the inquiry. It ended out without uncovering anything like the plot suspected by Mr. Trump. But along the way, it put a number of those on Mr. Trump's enemies list under legal scrutiny. Mr. Durham looked at a range of matters related to Mr. Clinton's 2016 campaign, particularly its role in providing information about Mr. Trump's ties to Russia. A lawyer working for the campaign was charged but acquitted, and Ms. Clinton ultimately sat in for questioning before special counsel about a range of conspiracy theories pushed by Mr. Trump and his allies. Ever attuned to the coverage of himself, Mr. Trump grew angry and frustrated with news organizations casting the media as enemies of the people and singled out reporters for attacks, but he also pressed for investigations and prosecutions, especially when it came to what he considered intended to hurt him. While leaked investigations also common during the Obama administration, Mr. Trump's Justice Department took the unusual step in 2020 of secretly obtaining phone and email records for journalists from CNN, The Washington Post, and The New York Times, something that only came to light when disclosed later by the Biden administration. Wow. He really was using the Justice Department as a weapon to try and go after his enemies and undermine them in every way, shape, or form. Even while Mr. Trump was focusing on government powers on big institutions, well-known political figures, he rallied against some one-time aides and confidants who felt had betrayed him, some of whom subsequently found themselves battling the government. During the pandemic, Mr. Colin, who had been convicted on federal charges was stemming from his role in the hush money payment, was allowed, like many non-violent inmates, to serve his sentence at home. But when Mr. Colin refused to sign an agreement saying he would not write a book about Mr. Trump while serving his sentence, he was thrown back in prison, a move that a federal judge quickly reversed to be ruled to be retroactively. The Justice Department sued Stephanie Winston Wolkoff, who had been a friend and advisor of the First Lady Melania Trump, after she published a book portraying Mrs. Trump as selfish and image-obsessed. The suit, which sought to recoup Miss Wilson's wild-off profits from the books, was dropped by the Justice Department after Mr. Trump had left office. After Miss Magdalene Newman, a former apprentice contestant and Trump aide, announced she was writing a book about her time in the White House, the Justice Department filed a lawsuit against her, citing numerous ethical breaches. She was fined more than $61,000. And now, in the final weeks of the 2024 campaign, Mr. Trump is again openly threatening opponents, real and perceived, with investigations and prosecutions should he be elected. Referring to anyone he feels may cheat or has cheated in seeking to deny him a victory. He took to social media this month to proclaim, those involved in unscrupulous behaviour will be sought out, caught and prosecuted at levels unfortunately never before seen in this country. I know it's a very, very long, in-depth piece, but essentially what it's basically saying is that he will go after everyone. Those who he went after before, he will go after them again. He will go after them much tougher. With that power of the presidency, he will rip apart institutions and institutions that are deemed to be denying him the engagement of going after those that he perceives to be his enemies, and many of them who are may be deemed completely innocent. Like even Kamala Harris, who is completely innocent. I can see him making a fabricated story and pushing a narrative and making Kamala Harris basically be prosecuted for it. This is the whole Project 2025 thing, is to dismantle the Justice Department, dismantle the FBI, dismantle all these things, so that all the power lies within the president, and then the president can just say, get that person, and that person will be got. This is the kind of power we're talking about here. This is the length of a madman. If this man comes to power, and then you've got J.D. Vance, a man that absolutely despises cats and has a problem with a sofa, a weirdo, that is for sure. These guys are not just a threat to America; they're a threat to the global stability. I know the world's not exactly in the best shape right now, but things will be made a lot worse if Trump is elected. It really, really would. And yes, like Keir Starmer here in UK, I can understand people's grievances against not wanting to vote Kamala Harris because they don't want Democrats again. But I can understand that. I totally respect that viewpoint. But you just cannot have this madman running your country again. You really can't. And we have 14 years of Conservatives, and we just could not have that anymore. We just could not. But it doesn't mean to say that we're going to give Labour a free ride, that's for sure either, as we've covered on numerous occasions as well. But I hope you found that New York Times piece interesting, that is for sure. It really was interesting to read, that is for sure. It just shows just how crazy of a madman Donald Trump really, really is, you guys. So I want to cover Ukraine here, guys. So we've got there's quite a few stories to come out of Ukraine, and we're going to go through quite a couple of them from the Kiev Independent. I'm just waiting for it to refresh before I open up, and then we'll have a look at the deep state map as well, because that's something I want to do. We will have a funny video before the end of this show as well, guys, because I think we didn't we are kind of due one as well. So the first one I've got here from the Kiev Independent is the Japanese Prime Minister Kishida is to meet Zelensky in the US, and media is reporting. So Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida departed on September the 21st for his 4-day tour of the US, where he reportedly will meet President Volodymyr Zelensky. According to the Japanese broadcaster, the NHK, Kishida is expected to convey Japanese intentions to continuing to support Kiev and imposing sanctions against Russia during the meeting. Zelensky will soon head to the US to attend the 79th UN General Assembly in New York and present a 5-point victory plan to the American leadership. Ukrainian presidential office has not announced the meeting with Kishida yet. This will be Kishida's final work trip to the US before stepping down as Japanese Prime Minister. He is also expected to meet with US President Joe Biden and attend the UN General Assembly, among other events. Since March 2022, Japan has committed over $12 billion in humanitarian, economic and other assistance to Ukraine. Under the security agreement signed in June, Tokyo pledged to provide Ukraine with an additional $4.5 billion in 2024 and continue supporting the country throughout the next 10 years. So Japan obviously showing its intention to stand by its brother and by his brothers and sisters and allies here in the West. And I'm very happy for them to do so. I'm very, very pleased to hear that their support is not changing in any way, shape or form, which is great to hear. A Russian attack against Ukraine kills 8 people and injures 53 over the past day here. So Russian attacks against Ukraine killed 8 people, including a 12-year-old boy, and wounded another 53 the past day, regional authorities have reported on September the 21st. Russian attacks against the city of Kharkov and 3 other regional settlements killed 2 people and injured 21 more, Kharkov Oblast Governor Ola Shushbis have reported. The attacks damaged houses, markets, hospitals, hotels, warehouses and other buildings, according to Sinimbu. And 13 people suffered injuries when Russia hit multiple settlements in Donetsk Oblast, engulfed in intense fighting, Governor Vashkin had said on Facebook. Yeah, we know there's lots of intense fighting taking place there at the moment. Russian attacks against Donetsk Oblast destroyed and damaged almost 40 homes, 9 apartment buildings, an infrastructure facility, an enterprise administration building, shops and energy infrastructure, according to Vashkin. 13 people were killed, including a 12-year-old boy. Another 3 were injured, including a teenage boy, in a Russian missile attack on Kryvyi overnight. Dnipropetrovsk Oblast Governor Sergei Loskot has said on Telegram. Russian strikes also injured 2 men aged 19 and 15 in Dymo and a 38-year-old woman in the Nikopol district, according to Luskis. Over 20 houses, 3 apartment buildings, an educational facility, a school, and an enterprise were reportedly damaged in the attacks in Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. Russian forces targeted multiple settlements in Sumy Oblast, killing a civilian and wounded another 2, the regional administration had said on social media. Artillery, drones, mortars, guided aerial bombs, and multiple launched rocket systems were reportedly used to attack Sumy Oblast over the past day. And Russian strikes against the city of Kursk and 23 regional settlements killed 2 people and wounded another 7, Kursk Oblast Governor Olysky Pushkin had reported. Pushkin added that apartment buildings, 23 houses, and agricultural equipment were damaged in Kursk Oblast. And Russian missile strikes against the city of Oscar on September the 20th wounded 4 people, and the Oblast Governor Oleg had reported. Russia launched Ilyska-M ballistic missiles in Oscar, damaging port and civilian infrastructure, as well as civilian ships under Antiguan flag, according to Caper there. We haven't had a report on one of these for a while, to be fair. General Staff reported that Russia has lost 640,920 troops in Ukraine since the start of the war. So they give these out numbers on a daily basis, you guys. So this is obviously Saturday's one. So Russia has lost 640,920 troops in Ukraine since the beginning of the full-scale invasion on February the 24th, 2022. The General Staff of Ukraine's armed forces have reported on September the 21st. This number includes 1,440 casualties Russian forces suffered over the past day. According to the report, Russia has also lost 8,746 tanks, 17,170 armoured fighting vehicles, 24,966 vehicles and fuel tanks, 18,270 artillery systems, 1,193 multiple rocket launch systems, 949 air defense systems, 369 planes, 328 helicopters, 15,561 drones, 28 ships and boats, and 1 submarine. It's always 1 submarine whenever you read the report there. But yeah, they've moved over, so over 600,000 soldiers apparently have lost their lives, according to Ukraine's report on a daily basis here. That's quite huge. That is quite huge. That is for sure. What's this one here? A former Wagner base in Russia's Krasnogor Kai has been reported on fire here. A fire broke out at the Wagner Group's former military base in Monomol in Russia, Kalangor Krali, on September 21st. Russian independent media outlet Moscow reported citing Russia Wagner-linked Telegram channel. The Mokomol camp hosted Wagner mercenaries for almost 10 years and was the group's main base in Russia. And in the summer 2023, the base was reportedly handed over to African Corps, a unit consisting of Wagner fighters subordinate to the Russian Defense Ministry. The African Corps operates in Burkina Faso, Libya, Mali, the Central African Republic, and Niger, according to Medusa. The Wagner Ostrengtiska, apologise for mispronouncing my words, Telegram channel published as well on the day videos allegedly showing the base's administrative buildings and headquarters on fire. It is unclear what caused the fire. The African Corps have not commented on the fire. The Wagner Group played a pivotal role in Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, leading Moscow's assault in the Battle of Bakhmut in the spring of 2023. Yevgeny Prigozhin, the then leader of Wagner, died in a mysterious plane crash in Russia on August 23rd, 2023. Crash came 2 months after Prigozhin led Wagner troops in a short-lived rebellion against the Kremlin. Following Prigozhin's mutiny and death, the mercenary group withheld from Ukraine and became fragmented, operating in Belarus and some African nations friendly to Russia. Wagner units were reportedly incorporated into official Russian military structures such as Rosyska since the death of Prigozhin, and the Wagner group's fighting force has significantly decreased according to the UK Defence Ministry. I believe it has quite diminished since then, because we don't hear a lot about them, but we do know they have they are used as mercenaries in Africa and in other places, some African countries, as has been stated there, and others as well. The US may say Ukrainian medium-range missiles for F-16, Politico has reported. The United States may say Ukraine medium-range missiles for F-16 fighter jets as part of its latest military aid package, Politico have reported on September the 20th, citing unnamed US officials. The US is expected to announce a $375 million military assistance package for Kiev next week. Reuters have reported earlier as well. The package represents the largest tranche of US military aid for Ukraine since May 2024. The medium-range guide bombs, also known as Joint Standoff Weapon, the JSOW, might be included in the new package, officials told Politico. The missiles can cover a distance of over 17 miles. The contents of the package have not been finalized and are subject to change, the official has said. Reuters earlier reported that the US would likely send patrol boats, ammunition for high-mobility artillery rocket systems, HIMARSs, artillery shells and spare parts as part of the latest round of military assistance. The JSOW has a shorter range than the US-made Army Tactical Missile System, the ATACMS, a long-range missile that can travel up to 300 kilometers, that's 190 miles. Ukraine has urged Washington to grant permission for Ukraine troops to use the ATACMSs to strike military targets located deep inside Russian territory. While JSOW missiles won't accomplish that goal, the 70-mile range would allow the F-16 pilots to keep their distance from the front line and Russia's air defense system. Ukraine received the first US-made fourth-generation jets in late July and has already deployed F-16s to intercept Russian mass aerial attacks. One aircraft crashed during such a mission, marking Ukraine's first F-16 loss. So they've lost one F-16 already there. That's a real shame. I think we'll go to this last one, and then we'll look at the deep state map. So 49% of Russians support withdrawal of troops from Ukraine, a poll has said. Interesting. Always take polls with a pinch of salt, guys. So nearly 50% of Russian people support withdrawing troops from Ukraine and negotiating for peace even without achieving the Kremlin's military objectives, according to a joint survey conducted by independent pollsters, Extreme Scan and Chronicles. The figures represent a striking shift from the overwhelming support for the war indicated by past polls. A February survey from Luriga Center, an independent Russian polling organization, found that 77% of Russians support the full-scale war in Ukraine. According to polls conducted by Extreme Scan and Chronicles in September 2024, 49% of Russians support the immediate withdrawal of troops from Ukraine and peace talks with Kiev, an increase of nearly 10% from 3 previous polls held since February 2023. When asked about Ukraine's incursion in the Kursk Oblast, respondents said it was more important to oust Ukrainian troops from Russian territory than to seize more ground in eastern Ukraine. A majority of those surveyed, 53%, said they supported removing Ukrainian forces from Kursk Oblast, while only 15% said Russia should occupy more territory in Ukraine. Pollsters also probed the extent of which Russians were willing to support the full-scale invasion. According to the result, 32% are prepared to participate in the war if ordered by the Russian Defense Ministry, and while 29% they are not prepared to fight. Another 29% said they would support a new wave of Russian mobilization. The results are based on respondents from 800 interviewees over the age of 18. The poll was timed to coincide with the 2-year anniversary of the start of the Russian mobilization campaign. Both Chronicles and Extreme Scan began as startups in 2022 after the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. The research projects were initiated by Russian anti-war activists looking to undermine the Kremlin's claims of broad popular support through initiative polling tactics. It's very difficult in a dictatorship during the war to get what people are really thinking because they tend to identify themselves with the majority. They tend to lie because they are afraid, Alexei Moldov, founder of Chronicles, had told the Moscow Times in October 2022. Polls conducted by the Chronicles and Extreme Sound show significant less popular support for the war in Ukraine than those of other major independent polling centres. Some interesting stories and feedback there that we have here. I will say, obviously, with polls, I think obviously that the poll is different, would be much different if they had a bit more free will to be doing so. I think if most people said against it, they would probably potentially may be targeted as a result of speaking out on it. Not saying they would be targeted, but it's entirely possible in doing so. That is for sure, guys. I would say to take a pinch of salt there, but some interesting stories from the Kiev Independent there, guys. Right, so before we wrap things up, I do have one funny video before we wrap things up as well, but let's just have a quick look at the Deep State map. It has been a while since we've looked at this. This is the Deep State map. Link for it in the description if you want to try it out. This is the latest. Has it up? Yeah, it has not updated. This is the latest. Let me just refresh it to see if it has updated at all. It has not. This is the latest update. So the latest update is from yesterday here. So it still hasn't updated from today here. So if I'm just going to zoom out a little bit, or maybe too far out here. So this is the main front line here, the red. For those who, just to give a bit of context, for those who can't see. So the green patches here, this was counter-offensive territory that Ukraine captured back from Ukraine when it had its counter-offensive a few years ago. The red, purple, and red territories obviously belongs to Ukraine, but Russia have taken, so it's Russian occupied territory here. So there, and then just up here you can see just a little bit there. You can see the blue territory. So this is the incursion. Now, that the incursion that took place about a month ago now. I think it's about a month ago or so. So the Deep State are not showing exactly where forces kind of are. They're not having much of a reading on this. But obviously this blue line, the blue line below is the border between Ukraine and Russia. And then obviously the patch of blue, this is obviously where they have liberated here. And then you have grey area, which they're not 100% sure. So you know that Suga there, the town obviously is occupied. They were looking, it looks like they were trying to get to Koskovo. It looks like they may have gained access to this road, to a road line here. Not 100% sure, but I don't think they have been gaining much more since then. I'm just going to scroll back to see if there's been much change. So I'm going all the way back to the start of this month here. So it looks like, yeah, from most of this month, there's not been much movement here. So there was a little bit of movement according on the 11th. There was a big move. There was a big shift here from the 12th and this was on the 13th. So they shifted the pattern. So it looks like there was a big pushback. There was a big pushback here. So they had seized the road here. And it looks like there was a big pushback there. 16th, 17th. 18th, again, it looks like there's been pushback here on the 18th of September. And then this is, of course, the 20th. So this is the last report. So, yeah, so it looks here, according to the Deep State map, any kind of gains, it looks like they've stopped. I think there was a reporting anyway that there wasn't going to be any more gains anyway on that. But that's the situation there when it comes to the liberated there. We know, obviously, they've been trying to push in from other places up north. They've been making skirmish attacks here. Kharkov has obviously been one that's been under missile fire coming from Russian territory. We know that's been hit because we've talked about Kharkov on several occasions from here. They've been striking from up north there. They've obviously been striking from Ukraine-controlled territory, but we know Kharkov has been one of the situations there. And they do have some territory there at Russia. So over here, there's not been, as far as I'm aware, there's not been too much movement here. Yeah, there's not been too much movement along here. Again, this is not surprising. There is a little bit, there's actually been a little bit of movement here. So in the Nazgar, Dunvar, and the Koloskis here, if I just pull it back a couple of days here, you can see there has been some slight pushes here. So they are pushed. So it looks like now there are some actual gains from Russia in other pockets here, which is not good, obviously, for Ukraine, because the main push was obviously coming from Donetsk, but it looks like they're starting to push in small other pockets here. So they are trying to push on the offensive along there. Now, I'm just going to zoom out a little bit again. So Donetsk is obviously the... So it's pretty much here, this big blob here. If I just zoom in here for you guys. This big blob here, this is pretty much where the ground has been taken here. Now, if I just start zooming back, you'll start to see. If you go back a couple of days, keep going back a day, another day, you can hear from the clicking as I'm going back days, you can see that they've continuously been pushing all throughout the month. Since the start of the month, yeah, they've still been making big gains here. They are looking to all the way from Avika. Look how much ground that they have taken, Russia, since Avika earlier this year. And they are definitely looking for that main road there, that main road ahead of them there. So it looks like they've captured the town of Holovika there. They've obviously picked up some settlements there, Russia. And they are continuing to push through. Ukraine cannot hold this. Ukraine just cannot hold this bit here. This is where they're making the most ground. They're making the most ground, unfortunately. And there've obviously been missile strikes in Dynamo. We've talked about Dynamo as well. Obviously, there has there been much ground taken here down on the south here. Let's have a look here. Has there been much here on the south? In terms of territory taken here, let's have a look. Has there been much movement? Going back a couple of days, not really. So here on the south of this border here, there's not been too much ground movement here. So it looks like it's been okay there. But obviously this blob here on the blob from Donetsk is obviously every day they gain more ground, is becoming a bigger problematic. But along here, Olovishi, Halalipol, Veska, Nosrovidia, all along that line there, they seem to be holding pretty firm here. And there's not going to be any change along here because this is the Dynamo River here in Kurshkin. The river is stopping Russia making advances over here. Obviously, the counterattack pushed Russia across this river, and they've managed to hold it ever since. They have fired missiles and drones and whatnot, obviously, from this side into Kurshkin, but so far they've still been able to hold it there as far there. But that is the current situation at the moment. Now, Vladimir Putin has said, and I've said this before the last time I covered the deep state map, that he does want to claim all of Donetsk by the end of the year. This was one of his original objectives. And if you look up here, so you see just about where, just under the line there, you can see where there's the D. So that region there is Donetsk. So it looks like it's looking like he's on track to gaining that by the end of the year. So yeah, it's not good in terms of the offensive by Russia. It's just continuing. I don't know what kind of counteroffensive Ukraine are going to be able to do, if and when they're going to be able to do a counteroffensive. Obviously, the incursion up north has helped Ukraine in terms of this conflict, but yeah, nothing so much has changed down there on the battlefront, apart from what lots of Russian forces throwing their lives away. We don't know the numbers of Ukrainians. There have been speculation about some of those numbers, but Ukraine don't like to give them out. So we can take. I can understand people being skeptical about the numbers that Ukraine are giving about Russian forces as well, but I would rather take the value of what Ukraine are saying than Russia, if I'm honest, in this conflict, to be fair. But this is just a war that is of attrition, that did not need to happen, did not want to happen. And I don't know when this war is going to end. It could still go on for years still, potentially. But the longer it goes on, the more frustrating people are about it, because many people would rather that Ukraine would just accept the loss of the territory now, some people are thinking. I still stand by my position that I stand by the position that Zelensky should continue to fight this war, continue it. I understand if people would say to me that's not that Zelensky should seriously consider a ceasefire. But the problem is that Vladimir Putin, if they get a ceasefire deal, like and they lose that territory and they concede that territory, he's just going to start the war again. We know he's going to declare the war again at some point in the future. All we're doing is giving respite to Russia and giving respite to Ukraine. Everybody knows this. Everyone knows this. But like I said, I have short videos to try and keep an up to date on this anyway, guys. So we covered quite a fair bit on Ukraine today, which is what I wanted to do at least. But before we head out, guys, before the end of World's News Round, I wanted to give you guys a funny video to head out because it's been because I didn't have one at all for you guys. So I hope you guys enjoy this funny video I've got for you guys. It's a UK one, but we might as well have a bit of fun while we can, guys. This one is from some guy from Portsmouth calling into a radio show to talk about something or whatnot. But anyway, let's see what they have to say.
Colin from Portsmouth is on the line. Hello, Colin.
I am disgusted, Anthony. Absolutely disgusted. Keir Starmer is driving all the good people out of this country because of his communist policies.
Yeah.
Good people, like that millionaire plumber who looks like someone's ordered Rod Stewart off Wish. If millionaires can't afford to live in this country anymore, then what hope of the rest of us?
It's sad, isn't it, Colin? It's sad that they've got to leave because they're being asked to pay a bit more tax. It's really sad for them.
It's the rich elites who fund our NHS with the taxes they don't pay fully because they keep profits offshore, Anthony. And some of these rich people are landlords, forced into poverty by Labour's Corbyn-esque policy of saying that perhaps working people should be able to afford their own house.
Yes.
And to make matters worse, we won't even subsidise their children's private education. It's disgusting.
Well, somebody think of the very rich children. They're being persecuted, aren't they, these elites? They're a persecuted bunch.
First they came for the millionaires, and I said nothing because I'm not a millionaire.
Yeah.
Then they came for the landlords, and again I said nothing because otherwise my kids will have to live with me until they're 40.
Yeah,
so I
nobody
do
wants
agree
that.
with that one. That was a good one. But then, what about poor Liz Truss, exiled from this island because she's found a population even stupider than the UK?
I feel sorry for Charlie Mullins, Colin, a man who joined Reform only to become an economic migrant. I mean,
and he can't even go to Rwanda because we closed the flight.
He can't.
This country is leaking sewage everywhere, and not even Dino Rod Stewart can stick around to fix it. Anyway, mate, thanks for having me on. Love to the family.
Love to the family, Colin. Love to the family.
Good job these rich people have foreign passports at least.
Yeah,
Saved on airport queuing.
Thank God for that.
Thank God. Oh dear, we love you, Colin. Oh, absolutely brilliant stuff. Absolutely brilliant stuff. Check out Exploding Heads, their YouTube channel. Follow them on X as well. Absolutely wonderful stuff there. I hope you guys enjoyed that funny video to wrap things up. So guys, we've reached the end of World's News Round. What did you guys make of some of the stories we covered today? Talking about Iran potentially denying Russia some missiles. A Bangladeshi minister taking advantage of properties. The torrential rainfall and catastrophic climate disaster that is taking place in West Africa. The long piece, fascinating piece from the New York Times about Donald Trump in his time in president. And also what's happening in the conflict in the Ukraine war. Let me know your thoughts about all these stories and more down in the comments section below. Let me know your feedback, guys, what you guys thought of all of them as well. What did you guys think of these stories today? They thought they were interesting as well. Ping Pingu has nothing to say on it. Ollie is Ollie. Why can't Ollie sit? Ollie cannot sit properly on the orb. Weirdo. And Cash Dummy is just not keen on it. Cash Dummy's not keen on it at all, guys. So, guys, I will be back tomorrow with Snowflake's Viewpoint. But until then, if you haven't already, please hit the like button. We greatly appreciate it. Share it across social media so others are notified of this video. If you haven't subscribed already, please consider subscribing because it really does help support the channel. And if you want to go one step further, financially support me and the work that I do here, you could do so by becoming a YouTube member for just 99p. Or you can join me on Rumble or Patreon for exclusive content on those platforms. So thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to catch you all very, very soon.